Hello, everyone. How are you all doing today? I am so excited to be joining Allie Bender and Emily Strong, who are the authors of Canine Enrichment for the Real World and Canine Enrichment for the Real World workbook. Hi, Allie and Emily. How are you all doing today?
Hi, doing well,
Hi.
Erica.
Glad to have
Yeah,
you guys today.
same.
We want to invite you all to join us, as I mentioned, as you're coming online and joining us. We want to know where you're coming from. So if you can go ahead and leave a comment and let us know where you are coming from. We also want to invite everyone, if you have read this book, if you've read Canine Enrichment for the Real World or the workbook, we really want you to invite you to join and sign up online when you want to write a review for the book. If you've read it, already read it. This book has got lots of reviews for this book and for the workbook already. So we want to know if you've already read it. Put us in the comments, and we really would like to invite you all to join us today for questions. So I'm going to let you guys get started a little bit. We also want to talk about how we now have this book as an audio book. So can you guys talk a little bit about how that's such an exciting thing and why it's such a big deal that we now have an audio book?
Yeah, I mean, we've wanted an audiobook from the beginning, and it just wasn't financially or logistically tenable for a long time. But we really love the accessibility of it, and we want to honor different learners' brains and their realities, their schedules, and how they operate. And not everybody um, has the time, bandwidth, or physical ability to read a book with their eyes, and so an audio doing an audiobook was really important to us. But as you know, Erica, it was a whole journey and we got there, and I just want to say thank you so much for making it happen. You have really championed the audiobook, and I really appreciate that because you helped us to realize a dream that we had from the very beginning. So much gratitude to you, Erica.
I'm so excited about this. I know it's been a long time coming, and we've worked on this for several years trying to make this a reality. Something that I'm super excited about and super excited to announce is that while we do have Canine Enrichment for the Real World available as an audiobook, the workbook is going to be coming out soon. So stay tuned because we do have the workbook as well. And I really want to make sure that we're talking about that today. So if you guys have questions and you're tuning in, like I said, leave a comment. But this was a big process to make sure that it's something that's available. And Emily, you had mentioned before a little bit about how kind of having some accessibility as an audiobook. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there are people who are either blind or have, uh there's a spectrum of visual clarity that people have access to. And I don't have those vision problems, but my optometrist was this year's visit, my optometrist was shocked at how much screen time I have, and or just how much time, how many hours of the day I'm using my eyes and really like putting a lot of strain on my eyes. And she was like, your vision is getting worse faster than I would like to see because of how much you're using your eyes. So can you read less? And I was like, oh man, I am not even visually impaired, and I'm seeing for myself how important it is to have audiobooks available to me. And so that was just an extra layer of, it was something that, like I said, we've known about and we want people to have access to that. And I also just got some real world experience for like how it matters to lots of people, not just people who are visually impaired. And and then the other aspect of that is when I was still working with clients in person, I was driving on average 150 miles a day because I had really unreasonable travel radius at the time. And so listening to audiobooks was the only way I could read at that time in my life. I just didn't have the time to actually physically read books, and that was like 5 years of my life. So it's not just about your you know how your eyes operate. It's also sometimes about schedule or bandwidth. So for me, there's lots of reasons, but also I've been kind of taking over the conversation. So I'd love, Allie, if you have any thoughts, I'll step back and let you say
I,
things too.
I don't think there are additional thoughts.
I took them all. I was greedy and I stole all
You
the
took
thoughts.
all the thoughts.
It's a process. It is. Mallory said, so glad this is an audiobook now. So are we, Mallory. We are so excited that this is now an audiobook and that the workbook is going to be coming soon as an audiobook.
Yeah. It's so good.
So I've got a quote from it's like I said, the audiobook is coming and then it's also already in print, but this comes out in the workbook, the Canine Enrichment Workbook, talking about agency and talking about unlimited options. I really loved this part of the book where it says, anyone who's been to a restaurant with a 20-page menu or has been told by a professor that the next essay can be on any topic can probably relate to this phenomenon. And can you guys talk a little bit about this, about when you are both as someone who has dogs or the dogs in our care that have unlimited options and how agency plays a role? Can you guys talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the things that we see, and this isn't just true for agency, I think this is true for really any topic, is that we start kind of on one side of the coin or like one kind of upswing of the pendulum where we came from. I'm just going to speak for you, Emily, because like we grew up in the same country working with dogs at the same time. So, where there was very much when we were starting in this industry it was very regimented for dogs. You had to have like very strict obedience, all of that sort of stuff. And so we had, we were kind of over here in this pendulum swing. And then when we talk about agency, a lot of times we see people swing too far in the other direction where they're like, all of the choices are now available. And it's like, no, also bad. The sweet spot is almost always for everything in the middle. It's somewhere in that kind of gray area. It's neither black nor white. And so we really wanted to get that point across in the workbook because it was something after the book came out, we had so many conversations with people about agency and whether that was pushback of people saying, well, but my dog is going to make poor choices. And we're like, yes, no, we're not saying have the environment set up to make your dog make poor choices or to allow your dog to make poor choices. That's not it. So we got pushback like that. We also saw that pendulum swing of people were like, but you said all the choices, and now my dog who eats people is doing off leash hikes in really crowded areas, and we're like, no, also bad. Please don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a normal human learning process of like we chunk things up too big when we're first learning, and so it's really easy to swing from one extreme to another. But I also think when people are learning how to do things differently, regardless of what we're talking about, dog training or otherwise, it can be really scary to try something new. And so people a lot of times can sort of overcompensate for that. And so we would have a lot of clients and students who were like, well, I'm afraid to do this, like to restrict my dog because I want my dog to have agency. And it was coming from like a good place, but like a fear of doing it wrong. Right. And then, we also see these sort of like dog training trends happen. And one that Allie and I have kind of tried to address a lot more directly in the past year or so is this idea that like training in itself is intrinsically coercive or bad, or training reduces agency, or training is unnatural. And it's like, no, that's skill building. Like you were thinking of it as the way that humans have historically trained, but really training is just learning, and learning is just a part of life. And wild animals also learn. They are also trained by their parents or other members of their social group. They also have to learn critical life skills so that they can survive and thrive. So not training is not giving animals more agency. It's giving them less agency because you're not empowering them with the skills to navigate their environment. Right. And so that has been a big focus for us in the past year or so of like, yes, agency, and also total freedom without any kind of structure or cues or predictability is chaotic and distressing. It's not empowering. Right.
Yeah. I think that something that I really like that's in the workbook is talking about agency and this flow chart that is helping people to understand whether or not your dog does have agency as you're working with them, whether you're doing training and like how does that work? So I love that this is inside of the book and it ends up being something that's in the very end of the book as well. Can you guys talk about this flow chart and how that's applicable as people are reading through the book and then applying it in real time?
I'm going to let Allie answer this one because this was mostly Allie. I mean, I helped Allie with the flow chart, but this is mostly her brainchild. So
Sure. So as we were just discussing, the sweet spot lies somewhere in the middle of it's neither black nor white. We live in this gray area. And so one of the things that was hard was after the book came out, I'm really honestly like agency was one of the topics we got the most questions about, hands down, after the original book came out. And so one of the things that we were getting questions on was, does my pet have agency, the right amount of agency, however you want to word that to make it work for your brain? And our answer was always the very annoying dog training answer of it depends, because we didn't have enough information in usually the situations in which we were getting asked that question. And so we wanted to really sit down and map out how we come to a decision when the short answer is it depends. And so here is all of the things that we take a look at of, does your pet have a choice between at least two desirable options in this scenario, just starting from there. And I want to go through one side of this chart for a moment so that people can see like sometimes not having a choice still meets the agency criterion. So if we say, no, this animal doesn't have a choice between at least two desirable options, well, is it because of a safety concern? Yes, it's because of a safety concern. Is there a viable and realistic training option to mitigate the safety concern in the environment? Sorry, Zorro fell on his back and made a very loud noise.
Zorro the turtle is shockingly loud. You wouldn't think turtles would be loud, but they are indeed. Or at least Zorro is.
They're very loud. He's now trying to right himself, so there's going to be skittering noises for the next little bit until that happens. But paying attention to the environment in which we're in, and Emily and I are working with the average pet parent who is not a dog trainer, doesn't want to be a dog trainer. They just want to have a happy, fulfilling life with their dog and or pet. This is true for any species. He has righted himself. The skittering will hopefully end now. And so we had to think about, is it truly realistic? Yeah, maybe there is a way that we can train this. Is that realistic for this family though? And if the answer is no, okay, this is a situation where the animal truly doesn't have a choice between at least two desirable options and still fits the agency criterion that we're talking about.
It's such a good way to use that chart to kind of work. And it's fun. It's fun to me that you're talking about having a turtle. Like, and Emily, you had mentioned when you were first writing the original book, like how using your experience working with multiple species and talking about in the book, you talk about the spider protocol and how that is applicable to not just dogs, but I'm thinking now about like, how does this apply to having a cat or a turtle or things like that? Can you guys talk a little bit about how that's applicable to the animals in your care?
Yeah, I mean, so for those of you who aren't familiar with it, the spider protocol is one of the enrichment framework models that is used in zoos, aviaries, and aquaria. And it was the only one that I knew about for many, many years. I only learned that there were others like 4 years ago. So when we wrote the book, I didn't know of any other enrichment framework. But when you look at it, it's really the more that we are learning in other fields that have nothing to do with animal welfare, the more we're realizing that enrichment frameworks are just systematic process frameworks. And like the spider protocol, the spider framework is a lot like other similar frameworks in other parts of the world. But in animal care, it's a way to really sort of systematically and efficiently figure out what it is that we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to accomplish it and how we'll know that we have actually accomplished it. And so I actually was familiar with enrichment framework processes before I was a behavior consultant because of my work with other species. And I was learning from particularly Scott Eccles, who is an avian vet. I was learning about enrichment before I started learning about the behavior sciences. And so for me, anytime I work with any animal, I'm doing this kind of enrichment framework assessment in my head because that came first for me. That came before behavior. And so I'm always looking at like, what are our goals for this animal? How can we reduce harm and improve welfare and well-being for this animal? What do we need to do? What are the options for how we could do that? And then looking at those options, are there redundancies? Can one thing serve multiple purposes? What's the most sustainable or realistic within the constraints that we're operating under? What's the most likely to be effective? And then selecting the things that are the most likely to be efficient and effective at helping us reach that goal. And then how do we know that we've reached the goal? Just because we implement it doesn't mean it's actually have the impact on our learners that we thought it would. So like, how are we making the assessment that we have actually in fact helped those animals instead of just feeling good about ourselves and walking away with warm fuzzies like I help animals? You know, like it's kind of a big deal if we're going to be in animal welfare that welfare happens. You know, like so a radical thought. And so for me, when I kind of entered the dog training community, which was I worked with dogs before I met Allie, but I really entered the dog training world when I started working at the sanctuary where Allie and I met. I like Allie and I sort of like recognized each other. Like we were like, I see you, because both of us had that enrichment background. And so we were both looking at behavior through that same lens. And that's why we became professional wives, because we were like, we're very much on the same page about how we approach that. It's not about what behavior can we get from this animal. It's what welfare and well-being state do we want this animal to experience? And then how do we help them, support them in that? And that includes what skills do we need to train them so that they can get there, right? So that was probably a longer answer than you wanted, but that's how we got here.
Allie, did you have something you wanted to add?
I'm not going to lie. I forgot the original question at this point.
It was a good answer. So it's funny that you bring that up, because I'm going to skip ahead to something I wanted to share with our audience, which is we have blank worksheets at the end of the paperback book and also the ebook for the workbook, and it will be available when we have the audiobook. This will be something that will be an attachment available with the audiobook. Something that I really love about these checklists is, as you can see on this chart on the left, this kind of fill in the blank option. Something I really was a big takeaway for me with this book was looking at creating a list of undesirable behaviors as well as the desirable behaviors and the goal behaviors, and how often meeting the enrichment, meeting the needs of these dogs is actually something that like you can find that the behaviors that are undesirable go away if the needs are met. Can we talk a little bit about that, since this is something that's such a valuable thing? Yeah.
Well, I'm going to refine what you said, because they either go away or we learn how to take those behaviors out of the context where they're undesirable and put them in a context where they become desirable. So the behaviors in and of themselves aren't intrinsically bad. They're just not working for us for some reason. And a lot of time, I mean, there are some behaviors like, maladaptive behaviors that are an expression of like the animal not doing well. I'm not talking about those necessarily, but a lot of the behaviors that people sort of call nuisance behaviors are actually adaptive, wonderful behaviors that the dogs are doing, because that's the only thing they know how to do in a certain context to respond to their environment. And so if we can just sort of channel those behaviors in a direction that's healthier, more beneficial, works better for everybody involved, those undesirable behaviors can actually serve as our allies in reaching our goals if we know how to redirect or channel those behaviors. So we want to leverage the desirable behaviors as much as possible. And also we want to review those undesirable behaviors and be like, which one of these could actually work for us if we put them in a different context? So a real world example of that is Miley, my little adolescent Basenji, is a super powered chewer. You would not think that a 22-pound dog could get through the chews that she can get through. And the undesirable behaviors of that are, oh my God, she has cost me hundreds of dollars of damage. She's incredibly adept, because I don't know, for people who don't know, Basenjis in the wild, they climb trees. That's like part of their thing. So she's incredibly adept at climbing things and getting into things and finding things. And she has chewed up so many of my things that I did not want her to chew up, including my glasses. I'm ordering more. I'm ordering new ones, but it's not, I don't want to stop her chewing. I just want to redirect her chewing. And when I find appropriate chewing opportunities for her, and I give her those opportunities and prevent as much as possible her from chewing the stuff I don't want, that chewing behavior becomes my ally, because it keeps her busy and it's part of her, completing her stress response cycle. And the other day I got a beautiful video of her chewing on a CET chew, and she's just melty. And then she took a 2-hour nap afterwards. So that chewing in and of itself isn't bad. It's just the context in which she was doing it were costing me a lot of money and sadness. But when we redirect that chewing to something that's more appropriate, it's actually part of her enrichment plan. It's actually working for us now, right?
Yeah, I think that, something that I do want to bring up is this idea of, I think something that I think about a lot is we think of enrichment. A lot of people think of enrichment. This is something that we find on social media, right? Like we've got people who are saying, well, just give your dog a Kong to chew on. Just give them, this dog's got some kind of bully stick or things like that. But enrichment, as you guys talk about in the book, is more than just letting your dog chew on something appropriate. It's about meeting a dog's needs, including them being able to chew on something appropriate, and hopefully not just, chewing on your glasses or things like that. So being able to meet our dog's needs is the definition of enrichment. That's something that you guys talk a lot about in your book, instead of it just being about, obviously I think that stuffing a Kong is a good thing to do, but thinking about it's more than that. Can you talk a little bit more about that definition of enrichment?
Sure. So in the book, we define enrichment. The long definition is meeting all of an individual's physical, emotional and behavioral needs in to allow them to perform species typical behaviors in healthy, safe, and appropriate ways, which is a mouthful that I routinely forget. And that's why I stumbled through that. But the reason I wanted to give the long definition is because there are so many elements of needs that a lot of people don't think about when they think about enrichment. So one of the things we get questions about routinely is, how can I use enrichment, or how can I do enrichment without food? And every time Emily and I'm not going to speak for you on this, Emily. Every time I get this question, I have this moment of like, I don't know how to answer this question, because like hygiene and veterinary care and like physical activity and security, like more than half of the categories that we outline in the book have nothing to do with food. Maybe we use food to train skills for healthcare or hygiene or security, but more than half of them have nothing to do with food. So I always have to pause and try to reevaluate what I think the question is. Because there's so much more about meeting needs than just food puzzles and play groups and snuffling and sniffing and all of that. The other reason I want to give the long definition is we're talking about meeting species typical behaviors and allowing them to perform species typical behaviors. And so one of the things that we see, especially as behavior consultants who are specializing in behavior issues, and whether that's the nuisance behaviors that Emily was mentioning, chewing, digging, barking, things like that, all the way to the really serious behavior issues that can be quite complex, like anxiety and aggression and fear. So often having unmet needs causes, or at least exacerbates, those issues. So we find that when dogs get to be dogs, then just like so many other things get better is the easiest way I can describe that, of when we just let them be a dog. And I think one of the things that we've seen as far as kind of societal trends is the shift towards not letting dogs be dogs. I think of when I was a kid and a little bit before I was a kid, it was normal to have your dog just kind of roam the streets and, hang out with the neighbor kids and then go do whatever it was over here, play in the pond, whatever. And now we have created a much safer environment for our animals, and also it's a much smaller environment that doesn't necessarily allow them to express all of those behaviors that they would have been expressing previously. And I think that's why they need extra help from us now, because the environment in which we're raising dogs, at least in this country, is different than it was a few decades ago.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've got a couple of comments I want to share. Mallory said, I'm so glad you're talking about super chewers, Emily. My dog Strider is destroying our couch. I know he just needs to chew and needs more cognitive enrichment, which is a great point, is that one element is mental exercise. So can you guys talk about how important that is to offer that to the dogs in our care, to make sure that they're getting more cognitive, more mental exercise as part of their enrichment goals?
I'm going to out myself right now. I have so much to say about this, because typically my day with Miley looks like a midday enrichment walk during my lunch break, and then in the evening I'm taking her through truffle hunting classes, so we do that. I give her these like little foraging boxes to tear up, and we do nose work out in the yard, just, throughout the day. And so generally speaking, she has a lot of cognitive enrichment and a variety of types of cognitive enrichment. And then of course she has her chewies when we're trying to de-escalate, and her pre-nap ritual is getting a CET chew. But we've had kind of a perfect storm of events. Allie and I are working on a course for KPA right now that is a massive beast, on top of the fact that we are also currently in the middle of registration, or just ended yesterday. We're having a registration period for our professional development program, which is called Pet Pro. So we were doing the Pet Pro launch. We're working on this course. And on top of everything else that we're doing, and also I'm working on a manuscript. Can I talk? Can I say it?
Yeah, you can say that.
We're also in the middle of writing the second edition of both of these books, which has quite a lot of new information, and I just like really overhauled several of the chapters. And so my time and my bandwidth and my capacity has really bottomed out. And then on top of that, we're in rainy season, and Miley, being a Basenji from the deserts of Northern Africa, hard no to rain. Rain is evil. It should not exist. Why is wetness falling from the sky? And on top of that, wait, I forgot the third thing. There is a third thing, but I just straight blanked on what the other complication. Oh, we discovered that she has like allergy. I know. Why am I, Allie? I know. I'm the reason we can't have nice things. I get it. Miley and I are well matched because we're both chaos goblins. But Miley has she started developing these food sensitivities to grains, which killed, like, I was using kibble as her like scent working for a lot of her training treats. And so I've ordered this Wysong Epigen 90 like grain and starch free kibble, so we'll be able to resume that stuff. But in the meantime, I haven't had access to the things that I usually use. So what I am seeing, which I'm not at all surprised about, but incredibly annoyed by, is that she is a constant, nonstop energizer bunny of needing to play and needing attention and interaction. She's constantly trying to wrestle with me. She's constantly trying to play with our 17-year-old dog, who is like, child, go away. Like, he's so done with her because like she can no longer do appropriate play with him. She's so amped up. So I am recognizing that I am living through a moment where I am not giving Miley the cognitive enrichment that she needs. And it is expressing itself as incredibly annoying and inconvenient behaviors. And I can't be mad at her about that. I'm just aware that we're going through a period where, both of us have some unmet needs right now. And that's just life. Life isn't perfect. We can't always perfectly meet all of our needs. And we're going to get through this the best that we can. And I try to give her as much as I can do in the meantime. And we've got some management strategies in place in the meantime. So we are getting through this tough time, but it has become so glaringly obvious. Even though it's annoying, I'm glad we went through this period because it's really obvious that Miley's not perfect puppy. It's just that historically I have been able to meet all her needs. And now we're seeing what happens when I can't meet all her needs. And she is a Tasmanian devil, and it's not awesome. but this too shall pass, right? This period of time will end, and we'll be able to get back into our routine, and then she'll be less of a gremlin, right?
Something that you talk about in the workbook, I was listening to the audiobook as I was in the production and kind of listening through it before all the files became finalized, was you talked about, setting realistic expectations for the dogs, but also realistic expectation for the humans. Like you just said, you have to acknowledge we're not meeting everybody's needs, and where's the priority, being able to meet the humans' needs, the guardian's needs, and the dog needs. And those aren't always going to line up. And, giving yourself some grace and being like, look, we're not perfect. We're trying our best. And, we have these flow charts. We have these examples of going through the checklist and saying, here's some room for improvement. Here's an area where we can, I think in the book, it even says like room for growth, and being able to say, where's the progress happening so that we are addressing some of these undesirable behaviors by making sure that our dogs are getting their needs met to the best of our ability, and realizing that, recognizing we aren't going to meet all of their needs. It is a work in progress. It's a journey.
Yeah, it really is.
We do have another question from Mallory that says, can y'all talk about what other reasons a pet would be participating in training other than treats? If there are no treats, my dog is not interested. I do not exist. I'm really glad that you brought this up, Mallory, because I actually I'm going to let you guys answer that question, and then I'm going to share a quote from the book.
Sure. Since I've been stalking the chat, Mallory, I know you were asking this question when we were showing the agency flowchart, and part of that flowchart is talking about using treats. If your pet is only participating in training because there are treats there. And so I'm going to answer the question you didn't ask, which is about that part of the flowchart, and then I'm going to answer the question you did ask. So in the flowchart, we talk about, is your pet only participating because of treats? And the reason we put that in is because we do see positive reinforcement trainers using treats coercively. And so what I mean by that is I'm going to use like medical or veterinary care as the example here, where the animal is staying because you have like steak or chicken or something really delicious, but they super do not want to do what you are doing to them. Let's say like we're doing nail trims or something like that. And so if the only reason your dog is hanging out for nail trims is because you are using steak or chicken or something super delicious, then it's like, okay, we have more work to do because we're actually using treats coercively in that way. And we added that because a lot of people don't realize that that is what they're doing. They're just assuming I am using treats and therefore it's positive reinforcement and therefore it's good. And that's a whole lot of leaps that are not factual logic. So that's why we put that in the chart. To answer the question that you asked of other reasons a pet would be participating in training other than treats, one of the things that and actually Emily and I just recorded a podcast episode about this last week. I don't know.
No meaning.
Time has no meaning. Recently, we recorded a podcast episode that will come out in the next few months.
At some point.
Is this for your podcast? Is it the Enrichment for the Real World podcast? Okay, yeah, it was not one where you got interviewed somewhere else. Yeah, if you guys are not already listening to that podcast, if you're not subscribed, please go sign up for that podcast. It's such a great addition. So
thank you.
It's a great podcast.
Thank you. So we just recorded an episode talking about, I call it the antecedent picture of what are all of the components that are going into the environment or that are happening in the environment to make a behavior happen. And so when we talk about training with treats, there are other things in that antecedent picture. And one of those things is attention from you. One of them might be proximity to you. One of them might be it's fun. And it's mentally stimulating, and sometimes mental stimulation is enjoyable and all of that. So there are a lot of other things that go into that antecedent picture with training. And oftentimes those are the reasons why we might see a dog choose to get food through training versus food that's just like hanging out in a bowl or something, where they're like, it's cooler over here. Like there's other good stuff happening over here aside from just the food.
Yeah. I'm going to share with you guys really quick. So this is what, go ahead, everybody go ahead and go and subscribe to this podcast because it's great. And there's some really great episodes in there. I was actually recently listening to episode 151, which is if labels are helpful or harmful. And I love this discussion. I've been listening to discussions about this for years and how they can be very helpful to have a label, but also it might not be doing so. Everybody go and subscribe to that. This quote, I wanted to share this quote from Canine Enrichment for the Real World workbook. This is something that I kind of took a clip from the audiobook when I was listening to it. And this is talking about food can be used coercively. So, Allie, you kind of just mentioned this, and this is something that I think is a really great conversation that, again, is starting to happen more and more when we think about positive reinforcement trainers who are using food, and just using food doesn't necessarily mean that it's always positive reinforcement. Just like, you say in the book that enrichment is not about giving your dog a Kong. It's about seeing how that affects their behavior over a period of time. So can you talk, I know you talked about this a little bit, but I wanted to give you both an opportunity to say a little bit more about this quote from the book.
Yeah. Well, not only does food not guarantee that positive reinforcement is happening, but also it can be positive reinforcement and still not honoring what the learner cares about or needs. And so, like, even if the food is appetitive and we're technically using it as positive reinforcement, like, if you come closer to this thing that you are afraid of, I will give you food. And the dog is more reliable about coming towards the thing they're afraid of in the future when they receive that cue because of the food. Positive reinforcement absolutely is happening. And also, the experience for the learner is not enriching because you're not addressing what they care about, which is, I'm scared of this thing. I'll come closer to it for food, but you're not changing the fact that this thing legitimately is awful to me, right? And that, the example that I use all the time, because it's such a poignant example, is when Allie and I worked at the sanctuary together. We had a lot of dogs that were like from hoarding cases and puppy mills and all, fight busts. So a lot of dogs were really, really scared of people. And there's this one dog named Sugar, and the caregivers, with really good intentions, were teaching her to approach people to target, I think. And they were using positive reinforcement. They were using clicker training, and they were doing everything, by the books. It was correct. But the dog did not want to approach people, and they were coercing her to come closer for food. And when you have an animal who has a history of food deprivation, they will do a lot of things they don't want to do to get access to food. And it was not the caregivers being malicious or mean. They were doing the best they could with the information and resources they had. So nobody's upset with them. But Allie walked into that enclosure, and that Sugar walked up to her because that's what she had been trained to do. And then she bit the crap out of Allie's leg. And they trained her to do that. They trained her to approach and bite instead of, she had a beautiful flight cue before, like, she would move away from people. They trained conflict through positive reinforcement. Right. And so, like, it is positive reinforcement. And also, it's not enriching. It's not safe. It wasn't meeting anybody's needs. It was removing needs. It was creating needs. So I love using that example because it is it was good intentions, and it was adeptly trained. They did a very good job of training that behavior. And also, it went really, really badly. So I like using examples that are really big and obvious like that, so people can see what we're talking about. If you try to get more subtle examples, it can be a little harder to tell, right? But that was a really big, obvious, like, positive reinforcement training gone really badly. Right?
And it's more nuanced than that. I think when I was very first a baby dog trainer, I remember I got the advice that, you're going to tattoo the 4 quadrants of operant conditioning on your arm so that you can be like, well, that's actually negative punishment. And, most of the clients that I work with are like, I don't care. They know, they've heard what positive reinforcement is. They don't really care about all the other quadrants. And there is some nuance to it. But thinking about trigger stacking, thinking about coercion, thinking about agency is so important. I am going to share with our audience this image, and I'm going to let our audience guess why I have shared this image. If you guys want to leave a comment as to why this is on here. And then I'm actually also going to share where this came from. This is one of my favorite things that you guys have talked about in interviews before. And I actually found a video clip of the original where this came from. So leave a comment if you think you know what it's about. And then I'm going to give you just a little clip of some comedy. So stay tuned. We're going to see if we can get this.
Because cake or death, that's a pretty easy question. Anyone can answer that. Cake or death? Cake, please. Very well. Give him cake. Oh, thanks very much. It's very nice. You, cake or death? Cake for me too, please. Very well. Give him cake too. We're gonna run out of cake at this rate. You, cake or death? Death, please. No, cake, sorry, cake. You said death first. Death first. No, I meant cake. Oh, all right.
So this is, again, this image that we picked here is tea and cake or death. And that's an easy choice, right? Like we're thinking about how, obviously cake, right? Capital Canine Show guessed that the reason that we put this image up was to torture you. Not correct. I really love this reference that you guys made in the book, and it shows up in the audiobook as well. This, bit from the comedian of like, yeah, we're giving our learner choices, right? We're giving them an option. But if the option is a treat or meeting a new person, like you were just talking about with Allie, of like, okay, well, that's actually not an option that was good for them, of, okay, I'll pick being near the person if it means that I get to have a treat, but that's not really agency, and thinking about that flow chart. So I wanted to share that clip with everyone who's tuning in of this idea of like tea and cake sounds great. And if you have to choose between tea and cake and death, obviously you want to choose tea and cake. So do you want to say anything else about that?
I mean, first of all, I love Eddie Izzard, and that what's it called? I don't know, show episode, that stand-up, Dressed to Kill is what it's called. If y'all want to watch the whole thing, it is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. So shout out to Eddie Izzard for being hilarious. But yeah, I think, to Cricket's point, that like anybody who was taught about like positive reinforcement training was kind of taught to believe that it's the only appetitive operant consequence, and all of the other ones are intrinsically aversive, and that's simply not. That is not how behavior works. You can have a dog, if the aversive thing is happening in the environment and you are not the one who's inserting it into the dog's learning experience, and then you teach them, you empower them to procure their own relief, to navigate that, escape whatever it is that they are not cool with. It is a negative reinforcement contingency, and also it is more enriching because of the empowerment part. Because first of all, you're not the one who's doing the aversive thing to them in a coercive way and saying, I'm not going to stop until you do what I want. That is coercion. But if the aversive thing just exists and then you give them the skills to remove that aversive thing from their life, that is so enriching, because you've given them the skill to navigate their environment on their own, and they can procure their own relief. They're not dependent on you to get that relief. So I'm not saying like, yes, let's all go to modeling and let's be balance trainers and sometimes like do aversive things. Like that's obviously not the take home point, but we need to be a little less dogmatic about operant consequences. And one thing I always just I drop this bomb and walk away, because I just want everybody to like think about it and learn more on their own. There are more than 5 operant consequences. I mean, there are more than 4 operant consequences. There are 5, and behavior analysis does not call them quadrants, because it's a matrix that's more complex than just 4 things. And also that in behavior analysis, what's called the contingency matrix of operant conditioning is like the alphabet. It's so not. By the time we're looking at behavior from a behavior analytic perspective, nobody's talking about the alphabet, right? And so like an analogy that I use all the time is like arguing about operant consequences is kind of like if you're having a discussion about masterful writing, arguing about what letters you use in the alphabet and getting into camps of like, I only use vowels or I use all the consonants. And, like, it's so absurd. Like, yes, you need to know the alphabet in order to know how to spell, and you need to know how to spell in order to write, and you need to know how to write in order to write well. But the time we're talking about masterful writing, we're not talking about the alphabet. And that is that is equally true for behavior. We need to stop arguing about operant consequences because that's the alphabet, and we need to be talking about masterful writing. We need to be up here, not down here. And I'm gonna say that does not mean that we're gonna be anti-behaviorism. It just means it's more complex than that. Okay, I'm done with my soapbox. I'm done. I got spicy and salty. I'm gonna step down. I'm gonna put my salsa in the fridge, close the fridge door.
Oh, we like it. Give us more. Tell us your opinion. That's why we're here. We've got people who want to hear
intellectual humility, friends. Just intellectual humility. Remember that it's really complex. And when we get dogmatic, that's usually a sign that we are oversimplifying a topic.
Yes, that's a really
okay. Now I close the refrigerator door. Now the salsa is put away.
Well, it looks like we might have another question, so we'll see. We'll see how much you're really going to put that away. Cricket wants to know: would you say that by positive reinforcement, R+, I generally think tossed food from the thing that the dog is nervous about to increase the likelihood they will move away from a stimulus that makes them uncomfortable is, in addition to R+ learning history, is self-regulation?
Yeah. Sorry, Allie, I know I'm taking your turn, but what I will say is when we teach dogs how to use negative reinforcement to their benefit, we start by teaching the skill through positive reinforcement, and then we essentially do a cue transfer so that the negative reinforcer of relief, that negative reinforcement contingency becomes the only reinforcer eventually. But yes, we do start by teaching the skill in most cases because it's complex and there are times when we would capture it instead of shaping it. But when we are teaching a skill through shaping, we start with positive reinforcement and do a cue transfer so that the negative reinforcer eventually becomes the only reinforcer. Right?
Great answer. We have a few people who said that they wanted to say, what a great analogy with the alphabet. Well put indeed. And well said. Thank you. So your spiciness is appreciated. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
I'm going to give people a minute to ask a few more questions. We're almost out of time. But one thing that I wanted to kind of leave everyone with when we think about enrichment for our dogs, and something I really loved about the workbook, like I've read the books, right? But listening to the audiobook, we were talking about making that more accessible. I love that we've got more and more audiobooks available at Dogwise, because as a dog trainer who spends a lot of time in the car listening to things on the way to lessons, I'm like, oh yeah, that's something I can apply with this client that I'm going to see, you know? And something that you talk about in addition to making sure that all of the needs are met, you know, you talk about, I had some video clips to share, but we're going to run out of time, of like making sure your dog is getting enough rest, making sure your dog is getting the social opportunity to play tug, play fetch, have that mental enrichment. But something that I think is often, what I was going to say is about the workbook is you talk about making changes across the board, like how that can have an impact. And really, I don't like the phrase client compliance. There was a wonderful presentation given at, I think it was IAABC conference a couple of years ago by a friend of mine, Gabrielle, who was talking about client compliance and kind of like, why aren't our clients being compliant? And then really reframing thinking about that, and you know, the positive reinforcement for the human, or sometimes the negative reinforcement for the human of like, I'm just going to give you this thing so that you stop tearing up the couch or chewing up my glasses or whatever, and thinking about something that is an across the board change that you can make very easily, and that is thinking about sniffing, thinking about adding sniffing to a walk. And you talk about sniffaries in the book, both in the original book and in the workbook. And can you guys talk a little bit about how important it is to give your dog an opportunity to sniff on a walk?
Sure. So one of the really interesting things about dogs is that their primary, you know, we all have our five senses and whatnot. Their primary sense is smell versus ours is sight. So, you know, we see the world first through sight, to the point where that phrase is the thing that came out of my mouth like it was a normal thing. And so for our dogs, they're seeing the world through their nose. And one of the really interesting things is that it's still a skill they have to learn, being able to process scent, and especially to the level at which dogs are able to process scent, with tracking and trailing and all of that. And so giving them the opportunity to practice that skill is so important. And it does super cool brain stuff. I can't tell you exactly what the super cool brain stuff is, but it does super cool brain stuff along the lines of increasing optimism.
Positive outcome bias.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Positive outcome bias. And then some like cool calming self-regulation sort of dealios in there. Clearly, I have not read the literature on it in quite a while, because that is what is stuck in my brain, is it does cool brain stuff.
It does do cool brain stuff, and I want to say Dogwise has lots of books about this. One of my favorite books is A Dog's Fabulous Sense of Smell, which hopefully will be an audiobook in the next couple of months. But we have a lot of books about tracking, and our most recent book by Pat Miller, that is Canine Cognition, talks about that, and talks about the cool brain stuff that happens when dogs are doing that. In addition, I've read a lot of the books that Dogwise has published and other publishers have done in the past few years about tracking, but even just offering, again, like we're seeing in this video clip of a dog just being able to sniff on a walk, and how enriching that can be. But A Dog's Fabulous Sense of Smell is a book that was published by Dogwise a couple of years ago. And it's such a great primer if you want to know a little bit more about the science, and if you want to find ways that you can add some enrichment that's focused on scent work for your dog, and you don't want to do competitive tracking, which I certainly don't. I'm like, I think, I've heard a lot of people in the last few years be like, every dog should learn how to do nose work and scent work. And it's so enriching and it's so great, but that can feel really overwhelming to try and figure that out. So there are definitely some resources I want to say on that.
I want to put out there that tracking and trailing are two different types of nose work. And tracking is when the dog is following a moving, active scent source. And trailing is when the scent source is static and usually older, and they're locating something that's static. And the reason that distinction matters is because tracking takes a lot of training and labor, and then you have to set up these situations where the dog can track something. And trailing is so much easier and more accessible. Literally find it is a trailing exercise. So tracking is awesome. And also, if you read those books and you're like, oh my God, who has the time and the bandwidth to do this? Fear not, friends. Trailing is available to you. It is equally as valuable. It has the same impact on dog brains as tracking does, and it's just way more accessible. So I'm just I just want to put that out there, because the tracking books are great. And also, I don't want people to think that's the only way that scent work can happen.
Absolutely. I absolutely, for my own dog, whenever he's like, I've got all this extra energy and I don't know what to do with it, I'm like, okay, we're going to hide some treats around the house. So, I send him to his crate, and he does a really nice, we practice this all the time, because I'm like, it's raining or there's bad weather or something, and we're not going to go do a treat scatter in the grass like I would love to do. So you just stay in your crate for a minute. I'm going to hide some smelly treats around the house and then release you to find it. And I do that with him all the time. And I tell my clients about that, of here's an easy, like you said, across the board thing that you can implement right now. And I tell people, if you can hear your dog's nose working while you're in the kitchen doing doing the dishes or making a meal, and your dog is sniffing so hard that you can hear his nose working, I promise you that his brain is also working. And it's a really great enrichment opportunity. And, do I wish that I had time to, teach my dog medical alerts and figuring out how to do competitive nose work? Absolutely. Do I realistically have time for that? Not at the moment. So like we talked about earlier, meeting our own needs as the guardians of these dogs and meeting our dog's needs, being realistic is really important. Ben said, I do scent work exercises with my dogs just for fun, not competition. And they love it, which is fantastic. Being able to use a long line on a walk to get your dogs to give them the opportunity to sniff things. And I think Emily, it was you that said, some dogs, this is a skill they need to learn, especially if it has been a priority for an owner to have their dog walking in a heel. Or I'm 95% sure that it was you guys in the original book that was talking about a mindless march, and how important it is to give the dog the opportunity to sniff, to have that all of that stimulation coming in through their nose instead of just, like you said, Allie, we're visual creatures as humans, but dogs using those olfactory skills. And so giving our dogs that opportunity is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that nope, I forgot. I literally, my brain just screeched to a halt. I apologize. I'm not going to take up time. So we'll just.
That's okay. It looks like Andra has a question. Did I hear you both have an educational platform for dog people? Can you guys plug that a little bit?
Yeah, we do. So our podcast is Enrichment for the Real World. Easy to remember if you remember the title of our book. And then we do have a mentorship program for pet professionals who want support in their career. And then, there's the private client side of if you want help with your personal dog as well. We have many platforms.
What is the website where I know that with the, like I said, with the audiobook, we're going to have a download that is available that has the blank worksheets in it, but also on your website, the enrichment framework and the agency flowcharts and things are available. What is your website where people can find that information?
It's petharmonytraining.com. And I want to say the worksheets are petharmonytraining.com/worksheets, but let me verify that for you.
We'll leave a comment and make sure that that's in the on our Facebook page as well. I do want to say that Mallory wanted to give you a compliment, Allie, that your books are organized by color in the background. And I also so I'm going to also share with our followers, we're going to give you all a coupon code where you will be able to save 20% at dogwise.com if you purchase either the physical paperback or the ebook for Canine Enrichment and the workbook version. And then we also wanted to say that anyone who left a comment or asked a question today on our Facebook Live will be eligible to win a free copy of the audiobook, Canine Enrichment for the Real World. And as I mentioned before, we do have the workbook coming out on Audible in just a couple of weeks. So stay tuned. Just yesterday on our YouTube channel, I posted a little sample of the audiobook. So it's like 3 or 4 minutes long. If you want a preview of that, make sure that you are following our YouTube channel because that's going to have that preview for you. But I wanted to just say thank you, both of you, for showing up today and for answering questions and making sure that we've got this wonderful resource available to our customers that they will be able to join in and tune into the audiobooks once they're available. So thank you both for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you, Erica.